Testing.
Hello, hello. Check, check.
Of course.
1, 2.
1, 2.
All right, thank you again for being here for the screening of Most Dangerous Women. Mary, who's running around here, one of the filmmakers, and then Janet. Where are you, Janet? Hi, Janet. There's so many inspiring stories that came out of that documentary. And part of why we decided to have a panel after the screening tonight was so that we could really circle back and bring home some of the stories of the most dangerous women, of the women leaders in our community who are doing some of this work. And so I want to welcome again our panelists to share their stories. Each will take some time to tell us about themselves and their journey. And then after everyone has had a turn, we will open up Q&A. The way we'd like to run this, if everything works out, is I'd like to give an opportunity to the panelists themselves to respond to each other's stories, or if they have questions for the filmmakers, I would like you to feel empowered to ask your own questions. And then I would also like to then give an opportunity for any students in the audience to ask questions. And then we'll open it up to everyone in the audience to ask some questions. We'll get to as many as we can while still wrapping up as close to 8 o'clock as we can to honor everyone's time. So with that, I'd like to have, I invite Lauren to start if you're feeling good about that.
Sure.
All right, great, thank you.
I mean, I'm still processing what we just watched. That was incredible. Thank you for allowing us to be here for its premiere. I hope that becomes required content everywhere. I don't know why you all signed me up to go first. That's going to be a mistake because this can go anywhere. But I think trying to stick to this idea of the stories that inspired us to be dangerous women. And I promise, I am the CEO of Professional Dimensions. My story won't be a pitch for that, but in so much of my story, it's a reason why I think I'm here. And that's because I've always been around very strong, bold, dangerous, courageous women. And that's like from birth to now. And that's been something that's been very foundational when I look at the through line of why I'm able to be who I am, why I'm able to make the decisions and do the things that I do. So often, the danger sometimes in celebrating individuals and humans is that it kind of centers an individual and a human, which is tough because for most things that we should be celebrating, it took a village. And that village behind it is really the story that we want to tell. And sometimes that gets covered up by the person. And then we have this tendency to herald a human and our individual, and we really should be celebrating the bold and dangerous choices that individual made. And actually that feels more inspirational because we all have the ability to make bold and dangerous choices. So that's really what I would say in my story. It's from being firstborn, shout out to the firstborn, we're special. But being firstborn.
No, the middle child.
We'll let you process that in a second, middle child. But just, being born to a very strong mother. My mom was VP at We Energies while I was growing up, and my dad was the head of a local labor union in Milwaukee. So you can only imagine just the contrast of being a daycare kid, working mom, working dad, in the streets, knocking on doors before I even knew what that was. That was just time with dad, right? And really, he was just using me to get people to open their doors. But not know, going back and process, I still to this day, I'm processing the things that my parents did and exposed me to. And then my village, I have so much respect for my mother because she was so selfless in the way that she raised me. And she was very open about the things that she cared about and loved, and the things that she felt like she was strong with and that she wasn't. And she was so quick to say, oh my gosh, you're creative, I'm not creative. You go be with your auntie Rinda, right? You go be here, you go be there. There was never like a selfish ownership or pride that came with the way that she raised us. And because of that, my village of strong women and role models was so vast that I think I felt very safe just being who I was wherever I was, because I wasn't always environments. I thought it was hilarious, the part of the film where it was like, we're welcome to women, and the ratio was like 6-1, right? Yeah, we're inclusive. But like actually that net, and I navigated a lot of different places, but I wanted to pull that as a through line. I'm like, you all share your stories, but the one thing I would say back to this concept of like places like the League of Women Voters and PD, and any place where women are united, there's a safety net. It means that when you make a mistake, you have people to fall back on. So it allows you to take more risks, and you can take more risks when you know that a loss is not really a loss. And that is the power, to me, of the collective, and the power of the net, for better or worse. And the beauty of that too is that the net can be built. Some people are born with more of a net than others. That's real. But the net can absolutely be built when we have a coalition of women to do that. So that's the theme of my story, and I'll pass it on to the middle child or whoever's coming next.
Sorry, Lauren, we went alphabetically.
Okay. Fair enough.
Nothing personal at all. And keeping with that, we
Hello. Okay. Let me try to move. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to lean into this. So, Hochon Krazara Hohamchi Kerewiga, Hingaire, Maikata Razra, Arvina Martin Winga Hingaire. I just introduced myself in my language. I am Arvina Martin. I'm an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And the first thing I said was that my Ho-Chunk name is Hohamchi Kerewinga, and that I'm still trying to find the right term for this. The government name, the name that I was given at birth, is Arvina Martin. I am the executive director of Emerge Wisconsin, which is a program that trains Democratic women how to run for office. So, I might be saying, hey, come join me. We can talk about that later, but this is nonpartisan, so don't worry. And actually, we have one of our alums sitting right next to me. Yeah.
I'm gonna shout you out.
Yeah, I get to shout you out first. And I was trying to think of like what to say about this, because when you go to these events, they're like, okay, tell us about yourself. And you've got like, well, here's my bio for like 5 minutes, and here's like a 7-minute one, and here's where I want to highlight this. And I was like, I have no idea what I think I want to talk about. Just because this topic is so just personal, and personal not just to me, but I'm sure to everybody in this room, and to millions of people not in this room right now. I also apologize because I was looking at my phone earlier, but that was to look up some things that I wanted to mention. I wanted to make sure I had the right date. So I think that when I think about my life and how I got to the place where I am right now, none of it could have been done without my family. And when I talk about my family, I don't just mean my nuclear family, like my parents and my siblings, or even grandparents, or extended for that. I'm looking to, didn't see if I recognize any faces in here earlier. So if you've heard this, I apologize, but in our tradition, no. Oh, sorry. This is what Ho-Chunks do sometimes. In our culture, the Ho-Chunk culture, your mom's sisters and your dad's brothers are also your parents. So my mom's sisters, I call mom. I'll call Nani Tony, Nani Don. My dad, his brothers are also my dad's. Their kids are my siblings. And then my siblings' kids are my kids, and my kids are my siblings' kids. So, you know, people that know me or grew up with me are like, oh, you've got one daughter. I'm like, well, I've got, I think, like 3 daughters, and I counted last 4, and everybody's like, it's because like these connections, sometimes you don't know what they are. And a lot of times, because I didn't grow up with, like, I grew up in Madison, so not up in Black River Falls, which is kind of our seat of government, kind of like big traditional area. So I always wait for someone that I meet to tell me what their relationship to me is, and then I can respond in kind and then be like, oh, thanks, grandma, like, thanks, Gaga, or, you know, oh, my brother. Also, age doesn't have anything to do with it. One of my, I guess he would be in the understanding of folks here, a second cousin. Ho Chung Wei, he's my little dad, he's 13. And so he's like, he's always like, hey, being good. I'm like, yes, Jaji, I'm being good. But back in the day, that meant that we would, you know, if something happened to your parents and you were a kid, you still had parents. You still had people to take care of you. If you are married and your spouse passes. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Because I'm a woman, I identify as a woman. My sister's husbands are also my husbands. Imagine the surprise of one of my sisters who got married, and all of his family looking at him when we yelled, "Time for the wives picture," and like 4 of us all ran up, and they're like, what? So that happens quite a bit. So if you lose a spouse, you still have someone to move in with and help take care of you. You help take care of them. And I think that has been that has absolutely been a huge influence on me, on my life, because in these relations, I've been surrounded with amazing, strong women from the get. My mom's mom, who I was named after, raised 3 daughters by herself, and worked and did all of these advocacy jobs for Native people and worked in Native education. She got her undergraduate degree when I was in 4th grade, and I remember going to that at Viterbo College, and that was a really big deal. My mom got her undergraduate degree when I was like in 6th grade. So again, I've had these experiences, you know, 2 of the women that are closest to me being like, yep, non-traditional, don't care, gonna go back to school, gonna do this. You know, my mom went back for her master's degree. I didn't know that I couldn't do things until later, until like people at school told me, and this is a sore point still to this day, in 1st grade when people called me the Jedi nerd because I really like Star Wars, and Star Wars is just for boys. I was like, Princess Leia though, like, what are you talking about? And it was like those, the from outside that came in, and then that was when I realized all of these kind of things, that these expectations that have been put upon us as women. And you know, I mean, obviously that did have an effect on me, and you know, I still thought about, you know, like how we do. And there's actually and I can't remember the specific statistic because I couldn't find it on my phone, but that Native folks that go and get degrees usually or tend to make less money because we go back to jobs that help the community. We're not the ones going into investment banking or like Bitcoin or like all of these things. No, we're going back, and you know, my grandma got her education, and then she worked with on educational programs for Native students with genetic issues that cause learning disabilities. You know, that's kind of how we tend to roll. And so that was what, you know, I always thought, yeah, I'll go to college, but then I'll come back and help people. And that's kind of how it went. And kept going until then I had another kind of huge moment that was my divorce. I had at the time, I have, well, she's 14 now and she's amazing and she's dangerous in her own right. And she will tell you that. But my daughter was about a year old and I had left all of my support system to go down to where he had a job and then didn't have support, postpartum depression, all of that. I came back to Wisconsin with my daughter, moved back in with my parents, and I was like destroyed because this was the first time in my life I felt like I got beat, that I was beaten. You know, always in college, I was like, I'm getting this degree because they don't think I'm going to. Or even when I was fed up, I remember thinking, oh, I should transfer to this school. You know, it's closer to home. And then I was like, no, I put in 3 years. I'm getting that degree. They owe me. Like, yeah, of course. And so this was like the first time that I couldn't fix it. And that really affected me. And I wanted to fix it not only for myself, but for my daughter, you know, and, you know, to be able to have two parents with her growing up is obviously, that was what I wanted, but it didn't play out that way. And I really, not only did I lose that particular kind of quote battle, but I lost a lot of myself because I was only dwelling or thinking about the things that were told to me about me, that things like other people's opinions that were put on me, and didn't think about what I knew about myself. And what got me out of it is actually how I know Nikita, the sport of roller derby. I always wanted to do that. When I was a kid, I was like, I wish I could play football, but I was, you know, like super skinny, scrawny, and would have broken all of my bones if there had been women's football options available when I was a kid. Instead, this was like the closest thing. Also, who else, like, roller skating's fun. Yeah, I can roller skate and hit people. Like, that's awesome. And our local league had they were going to try out a new rec league. So, but because this is Derby, it was WRECK league. So they said, we will, you know, anybody that has skating experience can be in. Otherwise, if you haven't skated since you were 13, we can only take like 20 of you. I was the 20th person. And I still to this day, like, I can't, my life would be entirely different had that not happened. Sorry, drink of water quick. But in that sport, I learned how to do things that were scary. When we learned how to fall down safely, I was like, I'm up here and I'm uninjured. You want me to like throw myself on the ground just to figure out how to fall? Like, I've been falling my whole life. Turns out that's really good practice and helps you, you know, not break any joints, etc. But here I was in this space where if you did something and you fell over, you know, what I thought was going to happen would people would look at me and be like, ugh, what they do? Because you pushed yourself to do something that you weren't comfortable with. You tried something that was outside of your wheelhouse, and that's the only way that you get better. And so every time we would do that, you know, every time we try to learn something new and somebody just bites it, you know, everybody starts applauding because they pushed themselves. And that reminded me of who I was, and where I came from, and who I had, you know, my daughter, who I wanted to be a good example for. And that was how I decided, yeah, I'll go into politics now. I started working on the recall. I was actually an intern, and then they had me, they were like, oh, you're Native? Can you be our Native outreach director? I'm like, yeah, you're gonna pay me? They're like, yeah, sweet. And that was the start. I started reaching out to tribes, getting people to the polls, getting them access to people that maybe they would not have access to otherwise. And that is like what I think about. Everything that's made me me has been because of the support that I've gotten from my community. You know, the Madison Indian community helped me quite a Native American community helped me quite a bit. My family, and the people that came before me. It reminded me of why I do the kind of work that I want to do. And that this was another chance for me to give back. I have learned all of these things. It's my opportunity to give that back to my community and say, look, I have the information. I know how to empower you, like to give you the information that you need, that you can go cast your ballot and know it's going to be counted. And I ran for city council and won, which was amazing. And now my daughter and one of my sisters, her two daughters, so also my other daughters, don't think of like being Native as an obstacle, you know, because now they've seen me, but other people, Sharice Davids, who was the first Native person, she beat Deb Holland by like a time zone, and like they both got elected the same night. Sharice is a friend of mine. She's Ho-Chunk, and I just, when they declared her race, I bawled because here she and all of these kids, girls and boys, and kids that maybe do not fit in the gender binary, they can see different people, and that was just another barrier that was taken down. So I guess one last part of this, I'm so sorry, taking so much time. Does anybody in here seen the show Reservation Dogs?
Yeah, so good.
The episode where Willie Jack goes to prison to visit her auntie, who is a healer, or she knows as a healer, and she wants to pray and figure things out. And her auntie puts her hands out and tells Willie Jack to do the same. And the two of them are sitting there praying. And I'm going to get teary, so just be ready. As they're sitting there praying, you've got this scene kind of like this. She's at the table, and all of a sudden behind her, all of these people appear, and they're people dressed in kind of old-timey clothes. And those are her ancestors. And as a Native person, to see something like that on TV that like absolutely resonates with me more than probably anything else I've ever seen on TV was incredible. Because before I started as the ED here, I was in Emerge. I did the program in 2014, and our first assignment was to draw a self-portrait with our values and things that are important to us. And that's what I drew. I had a picture of myself with my daughter, roller skates on. I had a Ho-Chunk skirt on, you know, and Green Bay Packers and like all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, this is not full. And I drew like people behind me. And that's what that was I'm not here without those that came before me. And all of those people were and continue to be dangerous, even just thinking about them sometimes. But that is part of all of our legacy, I think, and that I am trying to conduct myself in a manner that I can bring up as many of these descendants, you know, however many generations, that the work that I can do can help them along their roads, and that, you know, I will be behind all of them in the background, you know, backing them up, and we're never alone. So I'll just end it there.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's great to see you off the track.
Her name was Lilo Bones.
Roller derby.
I invite you to share about yourself, share a story, share whatever you want.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the Women and Gender Studies Department for holding this conversation. It's my honor also to be on this panel. And I was going to shout out Emerge, an incredible network of strong women all across the state of Wisconsin. I had the pleasure of having a class with and Lauren, we're in community quite often. About me, I am a product of Milwaukee through and through. I grew up in the 53206 zip code, which is known as the poorest zip code in the state of Wisconsin. Arguably the nation is home of mass incarceration, every disparity you can think of, education, health, and so on. My dad is son of Alabama. He was born in the South. He comes from a line of Buffalo Soldiers, which were Black cowboys in the Civil War and the First War. And as we know, Black people weren't afforded rights then. So despite them working hard and fighting for our country, they weren't given anything, no benefits. And so my father was born the son of sharecroppers, who eventually migrated in the Great Migration to Wisconsin. Coincidentally, my mom, who's a product of colonialism in Puerto Rico, a daughter of a single mother who was in search of factory work, also found her way to Wisconsin around the same time. And then they met each other and had me. And, you know, I love my parents so much, despite how hard they worked. They had no formal education, but they worked really hard. My dad started a business that he eventually lost because he couldn't get lending, which a lot of Black people know to be true. And my mom, who I definitely got my hustle and grind from because she was such a hard worker. She held 2 or 3 jobs at any given point. She was at the Boys and Girls Club. She worked at the local WIC office. She worked for Milwaukee Public Recreation in the summer for 20 years. And despite how hard they worked, they could never quite get ahead. So my childhood was very challenging. I didn't see my parents a lot. I was a reader, and I had books under my bed because I was taught as a little girl, when you heard gunshots at night, you go under the bed. And so I kept books there, and that was my safety, that was my comfort. And despite growing up in such a challenged environment, what was the saving grace for me, I think, was the fully funded public school system at the time. I had incredible teachers who nurtured my potential and saw so much in me and didn't write me off because I came from the wrong neighborhood. In fact, I was such a reader that I was excelling so much further than a lot of my peers. And so I had a lot of special time with my teachers. And when I got to high school, Milwaukee School of Languages, my guidance counselor and I started working, oh my gosh, at 15 years old, McDonald's. By 17, I was a shifts manager because mom needed help paying a light bill. And I had a guidance counselor pull me aside and said, you know, I didn't see any of your applications I didn't see your ACT application or any college applications. What's going on? I said, well, I'm just working. What do you mean? What are you talking about, college? That wasn't something I thought I was supposed to do, could do, knowing that my family had ever done it. She paid my fee to take the ACTs, which I did so well. I got a scholarship to UW Milwaukee. She helped me apply to UW Milwaukee. And when I got to the campus, I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And so despite that, right, like, you know, I don't want to make this too sad, but my life was rife with challenges because that's the nature of, you know, a person of color growing up in the poorest zip code in the state. I had to drop out of school when it came time for student teaching. And I found out I had to do it for free. That was a barrier for me. I couldn't do it for free. But what I did find with 60 credits was a job as a teaching assistant at Milwaukee Public Schools. And that was where
I finished my degree, and then I entered an alternative licensing program, MTech. So I then got my teaching license. I started teaching Milwaukee Public Schools 4th grade. And I didn't grow up in a political family. We didn't really talk about voting or politics or anything like that. But my dad said day one, join a union because they'll make sure, you'll keep your job. And I was thrown into the mix and had to figure out very quickly with limited resources, how to teach a classroom where I had 35 students on a class roster, no support teacher. The classroom they put me in had 3 tables and like 6 broken chairs. Looked like that had just been thrown on the ground. I had to fundraise for supplies. Thank God for Herb Cole, who like funds classroom lists. And I started asking questions. What the heck is going on? I was told all the time, if you just work hard enough, you can get ahead. And I'm like, no way under these conditions can anybody get anywhere. And so I joined, so I started organizing with the teachers union. I started showing up to school board meetings, asking questions, demanding better, started protesting and rallying in the streets, started going to the state capitol, demanding things of our state representatives, volunteering on campaigns. One of my favorite was Mary Burke running for governor, right? So inspiring. And then people started asking, why don't you run for office? What are you doing? Run for office. I'm like, no, y'all crazy. What are you talking about? I'm poor, like no one knows me. I have no experience. I don't know what's going on. And it was through support of like the union movement. And it wasn't just teachers union, it was the transit union. It was, UAW, it was all these folks. It was the parents, the families who said, go do it. We got your back. And they are knocking doors to me. They're donating. There's a race that opened up, and for the county board, my opponent was about a 65-year-old white guy. And so just talking about my experience running for office, so many doors I knocked. I would teach all day and I would go knock doors. The amount of times I heard, do you even know what a county supervisor does, right? Of course, right? Like, are you old enough to do this? Right? Do you really understand what's going on out here? Right? But that's the sexism part of that work. The limited resources, right? I didn't have money. I couldn't go to my parents and borrow money. I didn't know a lot of people with a lot of money. And so I had to raise thousands of dollars, $20 donations at a time. We talk about resources. Women of color have the most limited resources in running for office. But we pulled through, and I got 65% of the vote. And thank you. I'm telling you. And I don't know if you heard me, but she was like, I'm sorry. So I said, stop apologizing. Because one thing Emerge taught us was, don't apologize for taking space. You deserve to be here. And I question my, again, my validity for so long. But it's really my experiences growing up in that zip code, the experiences I had as a teacher that make me an effective legislator today. And I think about that question often. Do you understand what a county supervisor is, what they do? You're damn right I do, and I'm great at it. I've been able to, thank you so much. I've been able to pass so many incredible policies. My first policy was a $15 living wage ordinance. I've helped reduce evictions. I was the first in the nation. I declared racism a public health crisis. Since then, hundreds of cities and counties across the country have done so. Climate initiatives. I requested gender studies on gender equity on workforce in Milwaukee County, things that men don't think about doing, right? And when I think about the question, are you dangerous? To me, to be dangerous means to cause problems. And every single day I wake up and I cause problems, right? I cause problems for the status quo. I cause problems for those who are suppressing women's rights and civil rights. I cause problems against racist policies and racist policymakers and folks who are dismantling our democracy because women are building power, because people of color are building power. If that makes me dangerous, so be it, right? And we have so many ceilings to shatter. This work is not easy. Being a woman of color, leading the largest county in the state, I'm often, written out the narrative, right? I'm often overlooked. I'm often disrespected. I get the microaggressions almost on a daily basis, but we have so many ceilings to shatter. And when I think about my future in this work, I think about, Sojourner Truth, who was a Black woman in the suffragette movement asking, "Ain't I a woman?" Or Fannie Lou Hamer, who was one of the first women to run for Congress, Black women, and ran for the freedom vote. Or Shirley Chisholm, who was unbought and unbossed, right? One of the first Black women to run for president. And then people like Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor and flipped Georgia from red to blue. And we're all unsuccessful, but paved the way for me to become the first Black woman to chair the largest county in the state. And that's an honor, but it means nothing if I can't make it easier for, all the generations coming behind me. So that's why these conversations are so important. That's why I'm so happy you're here. So we'll save room for questions now.
You all were going to be really inspiring. No, that's fantastic. And I think that by opening up and sharing about yourselves, telling us some of your story, it helps everyone sort of start to think about their own narrative, start to think about the stories that are, Adina, as you said, thinking about only knowing what somebody told you about yourself, right? Instead of thinking about, well, what is my story and how do I write my own narrative and what's my space in history and within what I do. And so this is a really fantastic conversation, and I do definitely want to leave some time for questions. And like I said, I would really like to offer the first 3 questions to the 3 of you. So if one of you wants to kick it off, if you have a question for each other, if you have a question for the filmmakers too. I mean, this was also a screening, and Mary and Janet are nice enough to be willing to answer questions as well. So if anybody has one that they want to kick off, I know I didn't want to assign a first one to anyone. Thanks, Mary.
I don't have a question, but I do have an acknowledgement. After the 2020 election, when CNN put up their, who voted for who presidential candidate by race, and it was white, Black, Asian, Latino, and then something else.
Oh.
And so, because Native folks like to make jokes all the time, we've started making all kinds of memes about, oh yeah, so, this is our football team, the Washington something else's. I just want to say thank you to you both for including the story of Native women, including so much of what historically has happened. I mean, having a Native legislator on that you were able to interview was awesome. I just wanted to let you know that I'm really happy to see the inclusion and our stories being told too. I silently cheered when I saw Zikalasa during the opening, because I remember learning about her in college and being like, yeah. So thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
I haven't heard from you in a while. Do you
I was gonna ask a question. I would imagine part of the process is filtering through a ton of awesome content. What do you feel like was next up that didn't get captured, but like was really powerful that could have maybe been in here if we had a little bit more time?
Oh, there's so much. This is a good opportunity for me to give a shout out to our other person who was in the edits with us the whole while. Patty Ostermick is sitting back there. It doesn't look like it, right? She's sitting way back there, and Nadia, not up here. One of the things we really wanted to talk about a lot were the quiet women in history and who are change makers and who are, we again, what we're told about ourselves and who you have to be if you do this or that. And we were just kind of overwhelmed with all that we saw and all the choices to make. And I don't know, we just hammered it. We did it during COVID. On our way back from Wyoming, everything was shutting down. So we had intended to go back and we were going to interview people more in the West. And so then we thought, well, we have that lovely footage of the women, from the National Women's Studies Conference that we presented at, and we were interviewing them to kind of figure out where we, you know, what do we base our research on? What do we start to study here? And we didn't want to give up their stories. So then it just became, it was a huge mess though. That's to talk about.
Well, this is the first film I've ever worked on, and it's because of my friendship with Janet that I got the opportunity to do this. I'm a historian. And so part of this, and Patty, I'll use the metaphor that you use, part of it, the hardest thing, and you hit it absolutely. We have hours and hours and hours of wonderful interviews with these people. And eventually we hope to have the full interviews up on a website so you can watch the whole interview. But we couldn't go hours and hours and hours. We wanted a 30-minute film. And so the metaphor that Patty now taught me is killing kittens.
No. It's that, no, it's
Yes,
the
it is.
metaphor is, well, Patty twisted it.
Okay.
The metaphor is when you're in media, when you're learning some of the stuff is you gotta kill all the cute little puppies.
Puppies, excuse me.
It's even worse.
Killing puppies rather than, there are wonderful things that every single person that we interview said.
Yeah.
There's this great stories, the woman with the red glasses, Sarah Burlingame, who's fabulous, and sadly she lost the re-election, so she's not a legislator anymore, but she was just so wonderful. And she was, well, there's this great story about a woman who had fought for the public library in this little tiny town because they were going to tear the library down. So, and Clifford, who's the Native American woman, who's the legislator, who did win her re-election and still is a legislator in Wyoming. I mean, she had just amazing stories. One of her stories, and I'll just quickly, one of her stories was about her mother, who is not Arapaho, who is from another tribe, but who then who fought to be able to register her own daughters in the tribe because she herself was not Arapaho. So it was like, this is a really interesting story about her mother as an activist. And she told us this wonderful long story about it. We thought, oof, how can we tell that without trying to explain what tribal membership means? You know, you have to have all this kind of complicated, boring history backstory. We thought, oh, we're going to save that for someone. We'll save it for another film.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Killing puppies, that was it.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And are there any, so I was gonna open it up to students first, but happy to, but you seem so eager. Ask your question first from the audience. I'm sure it's on everyone's mind. This is part one. What is next?
Yeah.
Well, what we want to do is, there's so much we could go into here, but this film is based, we started out with a play, and we're not going to talk about the play because every time we talk about the play, that's all anyone wants to hear about it. So, but it would be, Mary was part of it at UWM, and it's a life-changing play when you saw it. And Jan Mayer is the author, and it's started with Will, the story of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which will be brought up in future segments. At any rate, we decided we could do with film, and Jan, the playwright, really encouraged us to do a film because we can span, you know, different areas, and not our story can keep changing. We can keep covering different parts of where are we now, you know, what and where are we going, and how do we keep carrying this forward and inspire each other, you know, to do it.
Yeah.
This is a very, very awesome compilation.
Could you stand up maybe? Could you stand up? Yeah, stand up. Yeah, so people can hear you, right? Yeah.
The compilation itself is awesome. I mean, I can keep my eyes off. I try to read every single sentence. I mean, this feel from So my question is.
Oh, yes.
No.
You know, we're really, everything was so stalled with with COVID, and we're just getting into that right now. One great thing is we were invited to write a grant with Wyoming Humanities And they want to show the film, they want us to come out and show the film around the state and have events like this. I mean, I just have to say, you guys, I mean, just so wonderful to see you after watching the film again, which I haven't seen for a long time. This is what we're all about. And Nikita up there, and Nikita was, and all of the women working on this, who we need to thank too, all of the women in the league. And the women who are joining us to help us now, you know, like Harriet. Sorry, oh. Go, it's just. See. Yeah. So Harriet, thank you. Harriet Rothman is person who joined us more recently, and you can see why we need her, right? I mean, she's like, she can really, we need a lot of help with what we're doing.
Any ideas that you might have, you would write to them, know where you might be able to do, Janet Shredder, and Mary, and you're all really open-minded to your next location, kind of.
Yeah, we're thinking the Great Lakes would be a nice area to cover, you know, so that's makes a lot of sense.
I have a question about, there's a lot of things floating here. For me, I'm very curious, what made you all, it's a very powerful thing to use your platform and yield a platform and power that you have to elevate the narrative of others. And there's probably a reason why you arrived and decided to do that. And as I look around the room, everybody in here is capable of doing something. Like, everybody in here has a platform to yield and a platform to leverage, to uplift, and bring in conversation as needed. So first of all, that is dangerous. Like, that is you stepping into your power in a specific skill that you have. If you can think of a moment or series of moments that made you want to do that inspires you to say, I'm going to dedicate my time, resources, talent, energy, life, reputation to tell truths. What made you do, why? And especially putting in the context too of white women in America, right? Like, deciding to tell the truth and elevate the voices of others.
I'll just tell you mine, and you know, this is from, and being in this business, which is a very white male dominated business to begin with. So you start to, all of the things, you know, that you all talked about, you start to believe the things that people tell you are you know, and stuff like that. And there were a lot of great guys, and they would really, you know, want to give you a chance and things, but you really couldn't communicate well with them. And I had a ton of interns, a ton of, you know, really great interns. I had a 3-part series on gun violence that played out over 10 years with, you know, all of it and all of the engagement we did. But I wanted to collaborate always. And it's so natural, I think, for women to collaborate, to know if you don't collaborate, you're not going to have what you could have if you had collaborated,
Right.
you know, but they, and the guys mostly, you know, and I think they probably do it a lot more now. But they were groomed to think I'm supposed to be the white and you know, knows everything. So you don't collaborate. And so it was very difficult for a long time. And then I knew I just had to have my own company and do it the way I wanted to do it. And really get very, you know, just be weird and do it, and then find weird friends to do it with me. You know.
I did catch, and I'm so glad I did. Because dedicated this to Rose.
You bet.
Yes. Right.
She was one of the most dangerous women I have ever, you know, marched along with.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yep, she's about this tall.
Yeah.
And yet, her was power.
Yeah.
And she, I don't know what to say. But she was a
She was.
dangerous
was.
And I wish we had an image of her because, I mean, she's so remarkable and in her petiteness, she just is brilliant.
Yeah.
Did you ladies know
Yes. Oh, yeah, very well.
that road? No, I don't.
No.
She's like a
was-
Mother Teresa,
Yeah.
only
Jewish.
Yeah. No, she was very dangerous,
Yeah.
very dangerous woman. And she sponsored the play several times and in Milwaukee. And then she's the one, she worked, okay, so I'll tell you a Rose story. She wanted to, be a producer. I mean, she didn't want to be a producer, but she wanted to help us and a lot. And finally, I'm like, Rose, you're a great producer. And she goes, oh, she said, don't give me that producer credit kind of thing. And at the end, after everything getting done and doing all that we did, she said, I'll take that credit now. So, you're always growing. She was, I think, 92 then. So, yeah. So, yeah.
I think, but this whole bill around with a strong focus on the Native Americans in Wyoming is just so impactful. And when you're talking about location, I think it becomes important that you have to do this relative to other minority voices.
Oh, yeah. That's
So Black women in the South.
absolutely.
In terms of what that was like and that experience. Because the minority voice is still not being heard. And I think that this is a great bill to merit discussion, that in the school system, like middle school, because we've got to start somewhere. And we have to recognize that we live in a city that is probably one of the, in my opinion, and I was born and raised here, one of the most racist cities there is. That it is still divided. It's still all white in terms of how it manages, and I commend our super. I know you distantly because I served on the Commission on Aging.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for your work.
Because the conversations are not happening. We don't want to talk. And so I think hearing the stories from other states, does that make it safe to have a conversation in Milwaukee? Does that make it safe to have a conversation in the surrounding community? Because it's not just about Black, but it's about any person who's not white and how that has impacted. So as you were talking about where, it's like, we need to hear the perspective, what this has been like. For other people of color in other parts of this country to recognize that it's across, it's a United States problem.
Right.
And we kind of don't want to own it.
No. Was it, I'm sorry, pressure to provide visibility? Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. The pressure is definitely there. And I've experienced this firsthand. As a Black woman in this work, you have a microscope on you and you have to talk a certain way, you have to look a certain way, you have to carry yourself well at all times. Again, like I mentioned, I'm disrespected quite often. And if I advocate for myself, if I'm defending myself, then all of a sudden I'm the angry Black woman, right? like, those are the sorts of things that I carry in this work, and my mistakes are amplified. And from this lens, there was a situation where a mistake I had made was heavily, it was everywhere. Up north, on the newspaper, on the radio, everywhere you could think of. If I do something good, you don't hear about it, right? But I remember this comment, and it kind of stuck with me because it speaks to this. And it was actually from a fellow Black woman who wrote me this and said, like, you're disgracing Black women everywhere. Right? And like, that hurt, one, because it came from a fellow Black woman, like, you should know how difficult this is. But two, it highlighted that itself, which is we're so underrepresented in this work that we have to carry the weight of our entire community on our shoulders. And I'm only 34 years old. I've been elected going on 8 years. Like, I'm still growing up. And that itself carries a lot of pressure, because every day I'm looking myself in the mirror and I'm like, do your best, be your best, prove them wrong. So, I'll stop there and say that it is present, there is pressure, but alternatively, there are so many folks I'm in community with who support me. I have my staff here. Well, I'm gonna start crying now because oh my God, so many young women in my office. Rob, my comms person, but he knows Rob knows he's heavily represented in politics. Bree actually is from, she graduated from UWM, interned with, and now works with us, and Emily, my lobbyist, these young women who I look at and they're so bold and confident. And they empower me every day, right? And so, yes, the pressure is there, but the reward is also there.
I guess a lot of it is the same. For me, especially living in Madison, like in a more urban area where people forget that Native people actually live. We don't just live on reservations, and we live in houses, not teepees. And like, these are things that have actually been asked to me, or people have asked me in like the last decade, like, well, what kind of horse do you ride? I'm like, Honda Civic. It's a hybrid. Her name is Old Sal. Like, and everything that Supervisor Nicholson, president or chair? Chairwoman Nicholson, because we got to say that, everything that she said rings true for me. The other part being that, I might be the only Native person somebody meets. That's scary to me. And I, like what you were saying, when I was elected, I was terrified that if I did something, I would screw over any other Native person that wanted to run for any office ever again, because I messed up. And that is, it's not tenable, and that's where that relying on your peers, people that love you and support you, where that comes in. Because again, it's that thinking of what people are projecting onto you rather than what you're thinking about yourself. So that's just another way of that happening. And it's no fun, but boy, is it cool when I had a friend from college. She's a Navajo woman, and lives in Arizona. And she told me that her daughter had a picture of me on her wall. And like, that's why you do this, for those kids, and she doesn't know where Madison, Wisconsin is, but her mom told her about me and she was like, that's awesome. And I will say I sobbed when I heard that. Just, oh my God, it's so real. So yeah, it has its positives and negatives.
Yeah, I'll add that I think every platform is an opportunity and a blessing. So I appreciate, whether I feel pressure or not. I sometimes tell people, like, tell them to come to me. I'll be the dispatch, because I get to spend a lot of time in community, so I can yield that platform and those questions to the places where I feel like they belong if I can't answer them, and actually take the time. And I feel like I've been gifted with the patience to really talk to anyone. So I actually value the pressure in the platform, because I think that that's a gift that I have, and that I want to make sure that I'm using to advance us and to show people that we're not a monolith.
That's
and that
right.
there's intersectionality in the many identities that we possess. And so I welcome that platform and pressure, if you will, to speak on behalf of anyone. And while Black might be one identity, it's women, it's people in education, it's people in healthcare, it's whatever. So I welcome it. And then you had another question as well? You realize the secret. There's not that much brilliance there. I'm just kidding.
No, seriously, that was exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, you realize how mediocre most of them are. And you question yourself so much, you're like, thank God I run the place. Because seriously.
I will say also that seeing their face when you correct them on something and there's, I have a picture of like one of some internet meme going, die mad, ha ha ha, you know, like, it's okay. That face is really kind of funny when they because they are underestimating you.
That's
you know.
it. Yeah.
There's this irony in the fact that we literally like give birth to these issues. I just want to name that. You know, like some of our biggest problems came from us.
Yeah.
Like, and what, like, there's a power in that as well. And that is that we have the opportunity to really shape that when we really unite and think about what we want and not let our differences divide us as much. We don't have to be the same, but there are a lot of things that we can come together on. And so I think I think realizing that too. And then just in the film, we talked about like the foresight and the skills that we bring. They're well aware of the skills that we bring. Most people in positions of power, regardless of identity. And I say regardless of identity because I think something that hasn't been named yet for this conversation is that we're operating in systems. And so some of us are the main ones upholding the Black woman that said what she said. It's possible for us. It's possible for me. And I do uphold a system that allows for these horrible things to happen to us. And I think if we don't reckon with that consistently and truthfully, like understand that when we are heralded or celebrated in systems that are broken, that we are actually upholding them. And so that's a real part of what we have going on. So it's important to remain conscious and stay in places that are going to challenge us consistently and allow us to reflect on the way that we have to interrupt the very systems that we benefit from. So I think knowing that we're all contributors actually kind of gives us the confidence too to say like, this is in the water we drink and the air we breathe. So let's get out of the whole guilt trip, blah, blah, blah. Like we're all responsible. So to me, I see that as opportunity because then we all have a hand in the solution.
Yeah, and just to add on that a little bit, because there are some men in the room, and I would be remiss. Yeah, so let me throw y'all a bone. Like I will be remiss if I didn't state, some of my biggest allies on the board are white men, and it was today that I learned. My staff will be interested in this, that Supervisor Sheldon Wasserman is who recommended me for this panel. I had no idea. I had no idea, right? And I learned that today. So yeah, there are a lot of, mediocre men out there, but alternatively, there are some great ones like yourselves in this room who are making themselves allies and partners in this work.
I'll just tell the Sheldon story. He was Sheldon Wasserman. I ran into him at Stone Creek. And I'm like, Sheldon, who do you know in city politics right now? Women that that are really out there. He goes, oh my God, Marcelia Nicholson. She scares the pants off me. But she's great. She's just great.
The board is like my classroom. It's like classroom management. That's all it is. You're going to time out.
No, it's so true. It's the way we get to be, I think, as women. I loved your comment about you create a safe space, and it is a safe space. And even if you didn't grow up with a safe space, you can be in safe spaces that get created with other women. And the guys don't have nearly as much of that, I think, in so many ways. And I've never thought about women's equality as anything less than equality for everyone, and more freedom for everyone, more freedom for men to be who they really are, and not be as constricted to their behaviors as we are. We can be out there and wild and fall. I love the falling metaphor, because some things don't work, and you tried it, and it doesn't mean you're just done. I mean, it's like, of course, though, with the microscopes on you, then you're supposed to be done now, right? That's how it's supposed to go. You're supposed to just fail. But I mean, that's just not what it is. And it's very much about everyone to be able to do this stuff, and to be you, and and then you get old enough and you just have to laugh at so much. You have to laugh at yourself every day, and your buddies.
Yeah.
All right, before we go any further, it is officially after 8 o'clock, and 8 o'clock was when we said the program was going to end. I feel like we could take this conversation in a million different directions at this point. So I think we're going to wrap up Q&A for right now. I do want to, again, and please join me for thanking the panelists that we have here, thanking the
Evaluation form, if you would like to fill this out, just tell us what you thought about this, about the film and about the panel and everything else. I had no idea, we had no idea that there would be so many people here. How did you hear about this? We tried a variety of different ways of, walking around. The Big Women Voters through EWM. If you heard about it some way, outside of League of Voters particularly, please, there's a question at the bottom of this that says, I didn't hear about it. Let us know that, and just do a quick evaluation if you want. You don't have time to do that. I'm also talking about cookies and if you want more information, right, or seeing your email address or something. Question for you. Talk to us generally about that, about showings. Like us.
All right. Oh, boy. They want to get something.
If anyone would like to give comment afterwards, we have a videographer here who's going to be available. And they'd love to hear from you if you have anything that you'd like to say in response.
I was like, my brain stopped, and I was like, oh my God, wrap up. here. How did you find out about this one?